Okay, here's your quick tip. I want to show you how to do a Notan lift out. Now, the method I'm going to show you will work very well for on canvas or on a paper or a surface that is sealed. It works well for, this method works well for oil painters and acrylic painters. But for watercolor painters and gouache painters and those working with pastel, you would want to do this with a watercolor wash in ultramarine blue, or not ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, watercolor wash in cobalt blue. You would do a very light wash, let it dry totally, and then do the lift out from that the same way as you'll see me do the lift out with this. The materials you'll need for this, if you're a watercolor painter, as well as an oil painter or acrylic painter, you probably have watercolor around, tubes of watercolor, and so that would be just fine. If not, you don't have to invest a lot of money. Just buy one of these little praying sets of 8 colors of watercolor, and that should be sufficient. So what I want to do now, this is a canvas board, and so what I want to do is I'm using black. Put lots of water in there so I can get it nice and juicy. So I need black, and I'm going to use a combination of black and brown. So if you're using the tube colors, you would use like black and burnt umber or something like that. And I want to get a mixture here that's relatively thick but still runny. Now I don't know how to explain that, except if it won't go onto the surface, you'll know it's not thick enough. I'll put a little bit more brown in there. Now to prepare the surface, I start working. Now you notice when I first put that brush stroke on, it resists, the surface resists it. So you have to sort of work it into the surface with the brush. This is a watercolor brush I'm using here. You sort of have to work it into the surface and sort of cover the whole thing first. And you see, as you work it, it begins to get a little bit more friendly, and then as it begins to dry, it will give then some tension that will hold the color onto it. But this is a good thing because that then will make the lift out a whole lot easier. And so I just keep working it back and forth like that until I get the entire surface covered with the watercolor paint. And so, okay, I won't go ahead and cover the whole thing. You get the idea, because you do have to continue to work it. And then once that's covered, once the whole thing is covered, then you want to let it dry. Now you can dry it with a hair dryer, that'll be fine, but you want it to be thoroughly dry before you start the lift out. Then here's one that's already dry and ready to go. The next thing for the preliminary drawing, works really good to just have a pastel pencil. So I'll just do just a circle, maybe with a cast shadow. Now we do these lift outs when most of the subject's in shadow. Unless you just enjoy this method of working, you can use it for any kind of scene where the shadow is the shadow and light are more balanced as far as amounts go. But it especially works well where there's predominant shadow. And so you can do your preliminary drawing with the pastel pencil. Then you want a brush that is, I use an acrylic brush here. You could use a stiff, you could use a bristle brush, a bristle oil painting brush, although they don't really like being wet with water. So I use here an acrylic brush. This brush is, I call it acrylic brush because it was made for acrylic painting. And one other thing you need, I forgot to get, but I've got it right here, is Kleenex, or some sort of a tissue that does not have a pattern on it. You can't use paper towel for this because it'll leave the pattern behind. But here's the deal. You lift out wherever there is no shadow, what I call not in shadow. And so you just sort of take your brush and you ease your brush around into the area that's in light or not in shadow and blot it. And when you blot it, you see you get that nice lift out area. Sometimes you'll need to lift twice. If the color is especially embedded, you'll need to lift twice and blot, lift and blot. And so there we go. We have a nice lift out area. So you would continue that over the entire surface wherever you see things not in shadow. You see this is in shadow, so I wouldn't lift that out, but just to give it a little bit more presence on this side, I'll say we'll pretend that a little bit of this light is hitting over here, and we'll pretend that the most of the subject is in shadow, and I'll lift that out and blot. And so there we have it. And I think you'll see that this is a Notan created with lift out. So there's your quick tip.